I guess we have Stacy Calhoun. How to improve the mental health, substance abuse, and offending outcomes of individuals involved in the criminal justice system.
Click here.
Click here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. So I'm delighted to be here to talk about some of the things that can be done to reduce the number of individuals with mental health and substance use problems who are involved in the criminal justice system. But before I go into that, I want to provide some brief background information on the prevalence of mental illness and substance use problems in the criminal justice population, as well as what is known about the relationship between behavioral health issues and offending. So as some of you heard earlier today, the number of individuals under some kind of criminal justice supervision has grown substantially since the early 1980s. In 1982, there was a little over 2 million individuals involved in the criminal justice system. By the end of 2007, this number had increased to almost 7.5 million, with approximately 31% incarcerated in jail or prison, and 69% on probation or parole. While this number has gone down slightly since 2007, 7 million are still under some kind of criminal justice supervision. So this increase in the number of individuals involved in the criminal justice system has largely been attributed to changes in policies. During the 60s and 70s, we began to see states downsizing and closing their mental health hospitals, largely due to the introduction of effective antipsychotic medications. It was expected that community-based mental health centers would provide the necessary mental health services for individuals with mental illness living in the community who did not pose a threat to themselves or others. Unfortunately, the community mental health system did not have the financial or structural support needed to meet this expectation. So as a result, a substantial number of individuals with mental illness did not receive the psychiatric care or other supports needed to live independently in the community, and subsequently became homeless and or incarcerated. Also, starting in the 1970s and really taking hold in the 1980s, we had the tough on crime movement that included the war on drugs and free drug legislation. These legislative changes resulted in a dramatic growth in incarceration, where mandatory minimum sentences for drug-related offenses and enhanced sentencing not only brought more people into the prison system, but kept them there longer. And these policy changes combined also led to a substantial increase in the number of individuals under criminal justice supervision who have substance use and or mental health problems. And so while it's generally difficult to get the true count on the number of involved individuals in the United States with behavioral health issues, there is a general consensus that individuals with behavioral health issues are overrepresented in the justice system. And in addition to mental health and substance use problems, justice-involved individuals can have a number of other issues that can negatively impact not only their behavioral health recovery, but also their offending outcomes. And this includes housing instability, employment difficulties, education deficits, poor social support, and exposure to traumatic events that often happen prior to the age of 18. So now our current drug laws make it a crime to possess, manufacture, use, and distribute illicit drugs. So violating a drug law can be a crime itself. But drug use has also been found to be related to crime in other ways. Paul Goldstein developed a conceptual framework that identifies 3 ways in which drug use might be related to other types of crime. The economic compulsion suggests that drug users engage in specific economic-driven crime to support their drug habits, whereas the pharmacological link suggests that chemical effects of illegal drug use lead someone to engage in illegal behavior. And finally, the world of drug dealing tends to be very violent. The systemic link suggests crimes are committed as part of the manufacturing and sale of drugs to protect property and position in the trade. So there have two perspectives have been offered to explain the disproportionate criminal justice involvement of individuals in illness. Proponents of the criminalization hypothesis argue that individuals with mental illness were increasingly becoming involved in the criminal justice system because they were being arrested for minor crimes or arrested as a last resort due to a lack of community-based mental health alternatives. The criminality perspective maintains that individuals with mental illness became involved in the criminal justice system because they have a greater propensity for violence and criminal behavior and possess a greater number of general perceptions of arrest. So the criminalization hypothesis, or the belief that untreated symptoms of illness, is the reason behind the increased involvement of individuals with mental illness in the criminal justice system, led to the development of several policies and interventions aimed at improving access to mental health treatment, which is in turn expected to lead to a reduction in criminal offending. Yet, even though there has been an increased emphasis on improving linkages to mental health treatment, we still see a large number of individuals with mental health issues cycling in and out of the criminal justice system. Also, findings from several studies challenge this assumption by showing that most justice-involved individuals with mental illness are engaging in crime for the same reasons as those without mental illness, and that providing mental health treatment in the community alone is not enough to reduce criminal justice involvement among those with mental illness. And justice-involved individuals with certain disorders present additional challenge to the criminal justice system. They have been found to have an increased risk of reoffending, increased likelihood of engaging in violent acts, an increased likelihood of violating the conditions of the community supervision, elevated rates of criminogenic risk factors, and higher rates of relapse and hospitalization when compared to individuals who suffer from just one type of disorder. So the sequential intercept model is something that is increasingly being used across the United States to identify key points of criminal justice contact where we can intervene to reduce further criminal justice involvement among other behavioral health issues. And these 5 intercepts include law enforcement, initial detention court hearings, jails and courts, reentry, and community correction. So the earliest point of contact with the criminal justice is typically through contact with law enforcement. The major goal of this point of interception is to divert individuals with behavioral health issues who have not committed serious crimes from the criminal justice system altogether and into community-based service alternatives. The Crisis Intervention Team Program provides an example of how enforcement can help at this stage. The Crisis Intervention Team Program brings together law enforcement, mental health providers, hospital emergency departments, and individuals with mental illness as well as their families to facilitate linkage to treatment and recruit and responses to people in crisis. The officers who are part of this program are trained on how to recognize and intervene with someone who is experiencing a mental health crisis and uses de-escalation principles and techniques to get the individual into treatment instead of arresting them. So, if a person has a serious enough crime where arrest cannot be avoided, there is still an opportunity for diversion at their initial detention and hearing. In general, the 2 interventions include the screening of individuals by mental health workers at police departments, jails, and courts, with the goal of identifying suitable candidates for diversion into a treatment setting before they enter a plea. While the major goal is to filter out the majority of offenders with behavioral health problems who meet the criteria for diversion at Intercepts 1 and 2, a substantial number still continue through the adjudication process in our sentence. However, there is still an opportunity for some of this stage to avoid incarceration by participating in specialty problem-solving courts. Specialty courts are separate court dockets that process offenders who would otherwise go through a traditional criminal court docket. And these special courts limit punishment and instead focus on problem-solving strategies and linkages to community treatment. Successful completion of the program results in a wage sentence and sometimes an expungement of the offense. However, in cases where individuals fail to meet the requirements of the specialty court, they will be returned to the criminal court to face sentencing on the guilty plea. Those who are not eligible to participate in a specialty court program and are incarcerated can receive treatment and other programming during this stage while incarcerated to address their behavioral health and community needs to better prepare them for their eventual reintegration back into society. And Intercept 4 is focused on reentry into the community after serving time in jails or prisons, with a major emphasis on ensuring continuity of care between corrections and behavioral health agencies during the transition. This reentry process should ideally begin at sentencing, where comprehensive screening and assessment are conducted to identify behavioral health and community needs that can be addressed while incarcerated, and then continue after the incarcerated person transitions back into the community. Case management services that begins prior to release and includes a comprehensive case plan that specifies treatment and services the incarcerated person needs once released from jail or prison can be used by jail and or case management staff to coordinate referrals to appropriate programs and services in the community. And finally, the fifth point of interception occurs when an individual with behavioral health issues is under community supervision. At this stage, probation and parole departments can assign individuals with behavioral health issues to specialty caseloads. Probation and parole officers assigned to these specialty caseloads supervise a smaller number of clients than usual who have behavioral health issues. The supervising officers receive specialized training for dealing with behavioral health issues, and problem solving is emphasized over sanctioning when dealing with clients who violate the conditions of their community supervision. And then forensic assertive community treatment can also help individuals under community supervision get the treatment they support they need. Forensic assertive community treatment is basically a community-based program that provides intensive case management, mental health treatment to individuals who have a severe mental illness and significant involvement in the correctional system. A multidisciplinary team not only helps the client get the treatment they need, but also helps to make sure the client's basic needs are being met, all while assisting the client in terms of their probation and parole. So there's been growing recognition that the criminal justice system is not always the best place to treat individuals with behavioral health issues. Incarceration in particular can be a very traumatic experience, especially those with mental health problems, where they have an increased risk of being victimized, as well as being placed in isolation and administrative segregation, which in turn can lead to further psychological problems. And a recent study found that even being arrested can have a negative impact on mental health over time. So as you can see from the Sequential Intercept model, there's great attempt to keep the individual with behavioral health issues from being incarcerated in jail or prison. And in California, we've actually gone further, where we have actually changed what constitutes a felony for Proposition 47, which was a ballot initiative passed by California voters in 2014. And basically, this reclassifies certain felony property offenses to misdemeanors. So those individuals who commit Proposition 7 eligible crimes are no longer being arrested and incarcerated. And the cost savings from reducing the use of incarceration for nonviolent and property offenses is being reinvested into the community to expand and enhance community-based behavioral health treatment and diversion programs. Now, while it's great that more emphasis is being put on treatment, some communities and correctional systems do not have enough treatment slots to meet the demand. So more resources are needed to expand treatment capacity to meet the criminal justice population, which is what Prop 47 is really helping to do in California. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there's Many justice-involved individuals have a co-occurring disorder that treatment systems in general have not been well equipped to address, because traditionally mental health and substance abuse services are delivered in separate systems that have different regulations, financing, educational requirements. And while both providers have very specialized knowledge about treating the disorder they are targeting, they may not know how to treat someone with a co-occurring disorder. And in an incarcerated setting, those who are incarcerated have a constitutional right to mental health treatment, but not necessarily for substance abuse treatment. So what you tend to see is that people with a co-occurring disorder tend to be mostly treated for their mental health problem, which basically mostly consists of psychiatric medication. And so the integrated treatment model has been identified as a best practice for providing treatment to persons with co-occurring disorders. In the criminal justice population, it's important to not only develop an integrated treatment program that can address both mental health and substance use disorders, but if we want to reduce their offending, we also have to include interventions that can reduce their criminogenic needs, such as criminal thinking. And so, in summary, justice-involved individuals with behavioral health problems have a wide variety of issues that tend to be complex, interrelated, and only partially understood. Treatment that does not take into account these diverse issues and needs may not be enough to reduce criminal justice involvement among those with behavioral health issues, especially since we do not have a clear understanding of what is really driving criminal behavior among those with these issues. And while some studies have found integrated treatment programs to be associated with improved substance use and health offending outcomes, more research is needed to increase the evidence base for integrated treatment for justice-involved individuals with mental health problems. And finally, in my research, I have interviewed hundreds of justice-involved individuals and found that so many of them have been exposed to a wide variety of adverse events prior to the age of 18, such as sexual and physical abuse, that have likely contributed to their mental health and substance use problems, as well as their offending, and all of which were never really addressed prior to their criminal justice involvement. So with that in mind, we really should not wait until people with behavioral health issues come to the attention of law enforcement to intervene. They've got to intervene much earlier by devoting more resources to prevention, so we can enhance the ability to deliver evidence-based interventions that can help youth understand developing behavioral health issues and engaging in criminal behavior from becoming entrenched in the criminal justice system as an adult. While this may not prevent everyone from entering the adult criminal justice system, this can help to reduce the number even further. Thank you.
I have a question. So I'm curious about a couple of things. You mentioned about probation and parole, specialized agents doing that. Does that really happen?
That does happen to jurisdictions. It's not widespread, but there
it's not happening. It's not happening in our county. I work at the public defender's office.
It's not happening in this county or
happening in this county. What we see, and I deal directly with like realignment on 27, what's happening is like they're assigned to the exact individual. They're not qualified for maybe specifically not qualified for other things. If you want to have fun. So a lot of times my experience has been that they're kind of like, I'm not a mental professional, I'm not a professional. So it's really challenging because what is happening with these individuals is they're just being, and there's a large percentage of them that can't function. So because to access a probation office, access a parole office is really unlikely, and then there's slash incarcerations that happen as well. In theory, it sounds really nice, all those entry elements, which requires recognizing it is a public health phenomenon. It's about public health as well with individuals because there isn't enough co-occurring program happening. You know, and I really appreciate the fact that you're bringing up this information because I think it's really vital. But unfortunately, being behind the lines every day, it's not happening. It's like in LA County, we have like the largest population of mentally ill co-occurring individuals, and incarceration parole is doing their job, and to the extent they are, but those wraparound services are not happening.
There's just a couple studies I've looked at, and I don't know if it's really been sustained.
Right, and now the county is so different. We're doing concurrent or consulting and that, but it is
I know it's hard to get, the personal.
But thank you for everything. I appreciate your presentation.
So we have this link between sexual and physical trauma, mental health, substance abuse, and incarceration. You sort of think it's sort of a linear, one leads to the next, or they go around circles?
I don't think we really know. It's really hard to figure it out other than that being cohort.
Right. But we don't know what studies on what causality versus what goes.
Studies that have tried to, but we just can't do it. We don't have the data to really assess that. So that's why an integrated approach, especially with trauma, that's really important too, to help with coping skills and criminal thinking and also mental health treatment. We have to be more comprehensive. And I don't know the best way to do that. That's why I say we still need more research to study that.
More other questions? Okay, thank you so much. Laura? Lara?
Laura.
Okay.